So, the Democrats and their media buddies are all up in arms, saying it's downright wrong to object to the certification of election results. Can you believe it? Let's hop in the time machine and go back to 2016. What's that? Oh, that's just the sound of the very same Democrats objecting to the certification of the election results. That's right, they pulled the same move they're now calling unthinkable. It's like, are people actually this blind and can't recognize the craziness of this? Here's evidence.
10 of the 29 electoral votes cast by Florida were cast by electors not lawfully certified.
The certificate from the state of Georgia on the grounds that the electoral votes were not...
And I object to the certificate from the state of North Carolina.
Objected to the counting of the electoral votes of the state of Ohio.
Carolina, because of the massive voter suppression and the closing of polling booths.
There's no debate. There's no debate.
I have an objection to the electoral votes.
The objection is in writing, and I don't care that it is not signed by a member of the Senate.
I do not wish to debate. I wish to ask, is there one United States Senator who will join me in this letter?
Democrats, I've got a bone to pick with you, because when you realize that the words of the president couldn't have possibly incited the riot, as you so boldly alleged in your article of impeachment, you tried to shift the narrative. You claimed that even discussing election security and questioning the integrity of our elections was a dangerous path. One of your own, Mr. Cicilline, insisted that this isn't about the specific words used by Mr. Trump alone. No, he said, it's about the so-called big lie, the assertion that the election was rigged. You argued that it was this big lie that sparked the riot, and that the big lie was the president's questioning of the fairness of the election, or the claim that it was stolen. You told us that saying an election was stolen is incendiary to a candidate's supporters and can provoke them to violence. You said that claiming an election was stolen or illegitimate is something a candidate should never utter because they must know that such words can lead to violent insurrection. But let's get real here. Your stance seems to be more specific than that. What you're really saying is that when Republican candidates claim an election is stolen or the winner is illegitimate, it's tantamount to inciting an insurrection, and they should know better. Yet, Democratic candidates, oh, they're free to claim the election was stolen, to call the winner illegitimate, or to make any wild claim they want. They have the absolute right to do so, even if there's not a shred of evidence to back it up. Democratic candidates can cry foul over an election, blaming Russian collusion or whatever else they please, and that's perfectly fine, and it's not inciting an insurrection. But when Democratic candidates publicly denounce an election as stolen or illegitimate, it's never considered a big lie. You've been playing this game for years, Democrats, and it's time someone called you out on it.
Imagine telling your supporters that the only way you could possibly lose is if an American election was rigged and stolen from you. And ask yourself whether you've ever seen anyone at any level of government make the same claim about their own election.
If Stacey Abrams doesn't win in Georgia, they stole it. It's clear. It's clear. And I say that publicly, it's clear.
You can run the best campaign. You can even become the nominee. And you can have the election stolen from you.
He knows he's an illegitimate president. He knows that there were a bunch of different reasons why the election turned out the way it did.
Votes remain to be counted. There are voices that were waiting to be heard. And I will not concede.
And I respect where you're coming from, and I respect the issues that you're raising. You're not answering the question. Do you think it was... You're not using the word legitimate.
There are still legitimate concerns over the integrity of our elections and of ensuring the principle of one person, one vote.
I agree with tens of millions of Americans who are very worried that when they cast the ballot on an electronic voting machine, that there is no paper trail to record that vote.
But constantly shifting vote tallies in Ohio and malfunctioning electronic machines, which may not have paper receipts, have led to additional loss of confidence by the public. This is their only opportunity to have this debate while the country is listening, and it is appropriate to do so.
Everything they accuse Trump of, they are guilty of. They accuse Trump of undermining democracy. Look at how they've handled elections, questioning outcomes when it suits them, and calling it a threat to democracy when others do the same. They've been playing this game for years, and it's a double standard that's hard to ignore. They accuse Trump of inciting violence. Let's not forget the time some of them have openly supported or failed to condemn violent protests. Where was the outrage then? Where were the calls for accountability? It seems like incitement is only a problem when it's coming from the other side of the aisle. They accuse Trump of lying to the American people. Let's talk about the promises they've made and broken. Unity, COVID relief. They've made grand statements and then turned around and done the exact opposite. The hypocrisy is glaring, and the American people are taking notice. They accuse Trump of being a threat to national security. What about the way some of them have handled foreign policy, making deals and concessions that put our country at risk? It's easy to point fingers, but it's a lot harder to take a good, hard look in the mirror. They accuse Trump of corruption. Let's talk about the questionable ethics and conflicts of interest that have been swept under the rug by some of their own. It's a game of do as I say, not as I do, and it's wearing thin. The pattern is clear. Accuse Trump of something, and then turn around and do the very same thing, all while acting as if they're on some moral high ground. It's a political strategy that's as transparent as it is infuriating. So yes, everything they accuse Trump of, they are guilty of. It's not just a catchy phrase, it's a reality that's playing out right before our eyes. And it's time for the double standards and the political games to end. The American people deserve better, and they're starting to see through the smoke and mirrors. It's time for accountability, and it's time for the truth. Enough with the accusations and the finger pointing. It's time to take responsibility for their own actions and live up to the standards they claim to hold. Because right now, all I see is a whole lot of hypocrisy.